Hi everyone, I'm Mia. Today I would like to share how I made this caustic effect shader in Reality Composer Pro's shader graph. Whenever I start to make shader, I will look at a lot of reference photos or videos. And when I look at this photo, it reminds me that there's 4 kinds of 3D noise in Reality Composer Pro, which is Perlin, Fractal, Whirly, and Cellular. And noise are very good for making this kind of organic pattern because of its irregular change. And there is one I think it is most suitable for our case, which is Whirly. I make this side-by-side comparison so you will more understand what I mean. So without further ado, let's jump into Reality Composer Pro and start to make our shader. If you are new to Reality Composer Pro, in the center is our 3D viewport. The left side is our hierarchy. The right side is our inspector. And below is our project browser. We can hit this import button and import our 3D model. I will put this model in the description so you can go and download it. Now let's drag the model into the hierarchy and add a material shader graph and rename it to Caustic Effect Material. Then let's connect the plane with the material. So we need to find the plane's geometry and link it to our Caustic Effect Material. Then we go to the shader graph part. We can see that because its diffuse color now is this dark gray, so it appeared this dark gray color. Now let's add a Whirly Noise 3D just like what we discussed. When you try to connect the Whirly Noise 3D to the diffuse color, it will pop up an error message says that flow cannot connect to color 3. It is very easy to solve. We can use an convert node. The convert node will automatically change the type from flow to color 3 for us. Now we have the basic pattern, but the cell of the pattern is too big for our caustic effect. How can we change it? According to the documentation, the Whirly noise takes the position in object space and calculate it to generate the Whirly noise. We can adjust it by adding a node of position. So double click and add a position. When you add the position, because the default is in object space, so nothing will change. And in object space means that when we enlarge the plane, like if we enlarge the plane to 2, the cell will stretch. But if we use the position in word space, the pattern calculates according to the word coordinate. So the cell will extend smoothly through this new area. However, I think the cell is still too big for our caustic effect. And according to the documentation, it says that we can multiply the position to a value. And when the value is higher, our cell will be more compact. So let's add a multiply node and add a float. This float will work as our variable. Right now the flow is 0, so there's no pattern. We can change our flow to 2, so you will see our cell is denser. And we can change the variable name to density and promote it to uniform input, so we can control the value in the inspector. Now we have the pattern, and the question is, how can we make it move? Now we need to add a time node. So double click and add the time. And we use the add node to connect it. Adding the time to the position adds lagging offset. It will make the position keep changing, and so the Whirly noise appears animated. Now we have the moving pattern. The question is, how can I only keep the frame of the cell, but not the inside? Let me introduce the concept of opacity. Opacity is a value between 0 and 1. 0 means transparent and is black. 1 means opaque and is white. So if I change it into 0, you will see our pattern is gone. It becomes transparent. So now what we're going to do is use this pattern and connect it to the opacity. We only want to keep the white part, which is the frame of the cell, and let the inside, which is the dark part, be transparent. Now the frame of our cell appears dark gray is because our diffuse color is gray. Since we are making a caustic effect, I want to change it to a warm white. And now because our 3D viewport and our pattern are both light color, it is not very visible. We can hit this button to change our background color. I want it to be a more ocean color. And the next question is, how can we boost the contrast between the frame of the cell and the inside part? Let's use a node called power. And let me connect it so you can see what I mean. When I change the value of power to 2, you can see our pattern dramatically change. And if it's 5, the change is even more. But why power have this effect? Let me explain it in this graph. The black line is power of 1, and the red line is power of 2. Raising the value to the power of 2 push the midtone closer to 0. And since this is connected to opacity, those areas become more transparent. And if we increase the power to 3, we'll make this effect even stronger. So we can add a flow as a variable to control it more convenient. Let's rename our flow to contrast and promote it to uniform input. And finally, there's a thing I want to adjust. Now we are using the preview surface, so this plane will affect by light. You can see there is a reflection here. I don't want that reflection. On top of that, since we are making a caustic effect, it might cover a large area. So considering these two reasons, let's change our preview surface to unlit surface, which is a material won't affect by light. And we can also add a color variable and promote it to uniform input so we can set it in the inspector. And that's how we do this caustic effect. Let's review the node we use. At the beginning, we decide to use a whirling noise to generate this pattern. So we add the position in world space and use time as an offset, so the position will keep changing, and this makes the whirling noise appear animated. Then we use power to boost the contrast between the frame of the cell and the inside. And finally, we use unlit surface instead of preview surface. It's because two reasons. First is we don't want to affect by light, and the second is the performance consideration. And that's it for this tutorial. This is actually my first tutorial in English. My colleague Jane and I also made one in Mandarin, which include more concept behind shader. So if you are interested, feel free to check that one out too. And that's all for now. Any like, comment, or subscription would really mean a lot to me. Thank you. Bye.